Our next speaker is former council member from Montgomery County, Phil Andrews. And before he was on the Montgomery County Council, he was the executive director of Common Cause Maryland. And I was looking at the mission statement for Common Cause, and it says, to work to create open, honest, and accountable government that serves the public interest, promote equal rights, opportunity, and representation for all, and empower all people to make their voices heard in the political process. So I think moving from being the executive director of Common Cause, it's no surprise that Phil was the champion for public financing in Montgomery County. So he was the executive director of Common Cause from 1988 to 1994. And I was interested because I looked at this and I thought, wow, this is interesting. Among the accomplishments of Common Cause Maryland during his tenure were campaigns that led to the prohibition of fundraising for candidates by registered lobbyists and the banning of payments of honoraria for speeches and articles about official business by public officials. So I thought, wow, we've actually moved a long way in the direction of where we need to be, from where we were to where we are now. After that, Phil was for 16 years council member in Montgomery County. And activists in Montgomery County always told me with some awe in their voice that Phil Andrews is the person who knocked every door in his district before every election. And during his tenure, he never accepted funds from any PACs or developers. And if you want to single out one person who worked tirelessly to advocate for public financing in Maryland, it's surely Phil Andrews.
Thank you very much for that. I think there are a lot of people in the room looking around who probably remember Watergate well. It was alluded to by Donna Edwards, and I grew up in this area. I was a Washington Post newspaper carrier during Watergate, so I was very influenced by it. I saw it first thing every morning before breakfast. And so that certainly was an event that created the first wave of campaign reform in the United States. That's what led to presidential public financing. It's what led to a number of other campaign reforms around the country. It led partly, along with some scandals in Maryland in the 70s, to the public financing system for the state of Maryland that exists for gubernatorial races. And that's been used, it was used by Governor Hogan in his election. So it has been used here, but it's not available in the amount that's needed now for the current gubernatorial election, and it's never been able to be used. There's not been a system for the legislative. So we heard a great presentation by Donna about what is not happening because we don't have public financing and what it's like to be in an environment where you don't have it. And we heard from Mary about what it's like to run for office without public financing, especially as a challenger when you're running as an outsider. And so what public financing does is empower small donors, it creates a more level playing field, and it enables us to have candidates who are really funded by the people and not by a small group of groups or individuals. What my former colleague, current council member George Leventhal said about not having to spend all the time on the phone is partly because you don't have to be on the phone all the time to raise $50 donations, but it's hard to get people to give you $500 with a direct mail piece. So it changes also where candidates spend their time, as he's noting. I want to say it's very nice to be joined by my former colleague Valerie Irvin, and I'm glad that Senator Rosepep is here as well, who I know supports public financing. So how do you get it done? Well, it was a long effort in Montgomery County. It took 13 years to get the legislature to give us the approval to do it. That's what took so long. But they did. In 2013, the legislature did pass a comprehensive revision to the campaign finance laws in the state that included a provision that allows counties to establish public financing systems. And so as soon as that passed, we went to work on what became Montgomery County's system. And it is different than many public financing systems around the country, in part because we needed to make it Supreme Court proof, given the Supreme Court's tendency to reach out and overturn public financing systems when they find any kind of tangential reason to do so. For example, the Supreme Court overturned Arizona's public financing system because it included a trigger mechanism that said that if you're a public financing candidate and you're running against someone who isn't in the system and they raise more than a certain amount of money or spend more than a certain amount, then you can receive more public funds. And they said, no, you cannot link the receipt of public funds, how much is available to a candidate, to what a privately funded candidate is doing. So we had to make sure we did not run afoul of that. So in response to that, one of the things that we did was to make sure that there's actually no limit in our law as to what a candidate can raise or spend. And this may seem counterintuitive at first, but when you think about it, it's not the amount of money that is the problem, it's where it comes from. All right, there's actually more money spent on advertising some commercial products than there is on all federal races in the United States. So it's where the money comes from. Too much of the money comes from a very small group of people and groups. So we want to broaden that to the maximum extent possible. And we want to empower small donors, and we want to incentivize candidates to go get them. And you have to provide the right incentives to candidates because they respond to them, like most people. And so that really is the key, is setting up a system that provides the incentives that you want to get the behavior that you want, which is accountability to constituents rather than to accountability to the biggest donors. And of course, there are some people out there who are very big donors. And in some states, there are no limits on what they can give, like in Virginia. So Maryland, at least, has always had individual limits on what a group or individual can give. Not until 1991 were there limits on PACs, and that was something that took a while to get through. But there have been individual limits for a long time, although higher than some states. So in a sense, what we did in Montgomery County was to create a system that is both attractive to incumbents and challengers, which is what you want. You want it to be functional, and you want it to be used by a lot of people. There are, at the moment, about 31. It changes pretty regularly by the week or day. There are about 31 candidates, last time I checked, who are seeking public financing, seeking to qualify in Montgomery County, because you must reach a certain threshold. You have to, it's not a grant, you have to earn, you have to qualify for the match, and then you have to keep raising funds to keep receiving more matching funds. So for a district race, you need to raise $10,000 in contributions of $150 or less from at least 125 people to show you've got some significant public support. Because number one of the criticism of public financing from opponents is, well, we don't want fringe candidates to receive public funds. And it's a reasonable argument that a candidate should have to show some significant public support before they get public funds. So that's the threshold for a district council race. Our districts are about 200,000 people, so they are significantly larger than the districts here. We have 5 districts and 4 at-large seats on the county council. For an at-large seat, you have to raise at least $20,000 from at least 250 donors, no more than 150 from each. And these all have to be county residents, okay? You cannot qualify with out-of-county money. These are county residents, individual county residents. And for a county executive, you have to raise $40,000 from at least 500 county residents in contributions of no more than $150 each. And then those will qualify for matching public funds. Now, the match is also a critical provision, and we looked around at a lot of the other places. There aren't a huge number, but there are a significant number of places that have had public financing over the years. And we wanted to come up with a system that provided the most powerful incentives for candidates to find small donors. And we have I believe, a unique system in that it provides a larger match for the smaller donations. So the first $50 for a council race from a county resident are matched 4 to 1 in public funds. So here's where your $10 contribution becomes a $50 contribution, and your $20 contribution with $80 in public funds becomes a $100 contribution. Your $50 contribution becomes a $250 contribution. The second 50 for a council candidate is matched at 3 to 1. So that second 50 becomes a $150 contribution from the public, and $200 overall. And the third 50 is matched at 2 to 1. So 4 to 1 for the first 50, 3 to 1 for the second 50, 2 to 1 for the third 50. So there's still, an incentive to go after those small donors who have already given you some money, but there's more of an incentive to go find a new small donor and to broaden your base and to be accountable to the constituents that we want you to be accountable to, which are the people that are directly affected by your decisions, the county residents. For executive, we have a 6 to 1 match for the first 50, so a $50 donation is worth $350 to a candidate. The second 50 is matched at 4 to 1, and the third 50 at 2 to 1. Now, in exchange for this, the candidates who have to agree to, it's voluntary, you have to partake if you don't, if you want this money, you have to agree to certain conditions, but you don't have to participate, and you can't require candidates to participate under the Supreme Court's decision. So you have to incentivize them through an attractive system like this. But in exchange for that matching public fund system, which can allow you to leverage 3 or 4 times in public funds what you raise in qualifying private funds. So if you raise 200 in private funds, you can qualify for 800 or so in public funds. You raise 20,000 in private funds from these donations, you can get $60,000 to $80,000 in public funds. So most of your funding can come that way through the leveraging. But you have to be willing then to forego any contributions at all from any groups and any individual donation of more than $150. So no money from PACs, no money from unions, no money from corporations, no money from political parties, no money from any group. And this is advantageous to challengers because it is incumbents who are more likely to be supported by interest groups and wealthy individuals and groups in general, which are more cautious about supporting outsiders and challengers than are small donors. So you can predict that this will increase competition as a result of that, and you'll have people run for office who couldn't run before because now they're small donations, which they are able to raise, but not often by itself enough to run a competitive campaign, are now going to be leveraging public money that gives them the ability to run a competitive campaign. And we are seeing that in Montgomery County. The combination, we have term limits now in Montgomery County, so that has ensured there are several open seats on the council, 4 to be exact, and a new county executive. But the county executive may have been retiring anyway, and you may have had the same people run for that office even without term limits. But it certainly has ensured that there are those open seats. But the challengers are running, and there are about 20 to 24 people at this point running for the 4 at-large seats on the county council, the great majority using or seeking to use public financing. A lot of those challengers would not have the likelihood, at least, of raising enough funding without a public funding system to get their message out. So we're going to see a lot more competition as a result. We're seeing most candidates, 5 members of the county council, 5 of the 8 council members who are running for something are using public financing, and a large majority of the challengers. So it's going to get a great test, and it takes that kind of push. We had a great support of this initiative from Common Cause, from Progressive Maryland, from other groups in the county like the ACLU, Progressive Neighbors, the Young Democrats, the Civic Federation, and I'm probably leaving a group or 2 out. But we had a good coalition, but we also had a powerful idea, and we had strong advocacy within the council, and we had several council members who were really enthusiastic about it. So I know that it is always a challenge to pass campaign finance reform in any body, but the time is good for this. The time is ripe. I hope the momentum from Montgomery County will have some impact here. It seemed to have some impact in Howard County, which adopted it last year or the year before. A combination of actions has brought it about in 2022. And so I think there is a good chance that Prince George's County has the chance to do this for the next election. This being the start of an election year, or close to it, we're less than a year from the primary, it is a great opportunity to advance this and to get candidates on record. Lots of people running for different offices. The voices in this room are going to be powerful, and I'm really pleased to see so many people here out on a night like this. I assume that most of you are probably supportive of this idea. That is often the case, that we preach to the converted, but I hope that this will give you real hope that this can be accomplished here in Prince George's County. I'll just say one other thing and then stop and see what we can all see what kind of questions there are. So one of the objections that sometimes you hear from critics of public financing is, well, this is it's not the best use of public funds. We could take that $6 or $8 or $10 million and we could spend that on many other things. And how do you justify putting that amount of money? Well, first of all, bad government or government that's dominated by interest groups is very expensive, whether it's special interest subsidies or tax breaks or legislation, very expensive. And it can drive tax rates for years, and it can drive land use for decades, and it can that can be very expensive too if you don't have the infrastructure to go along with the development. So it is a very good investment. It not only will empower the people, but it will also increase political competition, which we are clearly seeing the result already in Montgomery County. And I would be really surprised if it doesn't boost turnout. And voter turnout in Montgomery County has been anemic recently. 18% turnout in the last primary in 2014, 2016. It was in that range. The 14 was the last state primary. So it was terrible. I believe it will be higher in part because if just the friends and families of the candidates vote, I think we'll have a larger turnout. But they're going to be reaching out to all their supporters, and we're seeing the power of the issue because the candidates that are participating in the public financing are talking about that, and the candidates that are not participating are not mentioning it. So that tells you a lot right there, right? So I think that the opportunity is ripe. If I can help in any way, let me know. But you have a wonderful supporter in the council in Councilmember Lehman, and I'm sure she will be doing a great job with her colleagues, but the support from the outside will be critical because elected officials do, over time at least, respond to perceived public opinion. And there's no question in my mind that public opinion has been moving in this direction for some time, and the only silver lining of Citizens United is that it has made the argument for public financing even stronger than it was before, because it is the best alternative to, at least in the short run, to that decision. So thank you for your interest, and I look forward to reading about Prince George's adopting public financing within the next year, and I'll be glad to help if I can. Thank you.